This is the coming revolution in higher consciousness. Listen now to Elizabeth Clare Prophet, educator, author, and authority on the most exciting story of our time, the coming revolution in higher consciousness.
The victory of planet Earth and her evolutions is dependent upon absolute God freedom for every individual man, woman, and child. It is certain that the guarantees in our Constitution, placed there by our founding fathers, were the establishment of bastions of freedom against encroachment and abuses by any and all powers that had ever been, would be, or would come. It is equally certain that freedom is not free unless it is exercised at that nexus of the heart educated by the Father, by the Son, and by the Holy Spirit. It is understandable then that every control, every tyranny over the mind of man, every indoctrination at the emotional level, the subconscious level of society, culture, civilization, places limits upon the individual exercise of freedom under one's own vine and fig tree, under the mighty I Am Presence and Christ's self. More and more controls can be thought of as the bricks that are put in a tomb built around a living individual. One by one, the bricks are put in place until the human identity is sealed within that tomb and there is no way out. There are great limits to freedom upon planet Earth and therefore enormous limits to growth and development. There is no progress that can be had on planet Earth except it come through the integrated personality in God, the one whose soul is one in his own Christ self, his real self, and who says with Jesus, "The Father worketh hitherto, and I work." It's the secret of leadership. It's the secret of following. It's the secret of community action which is victorious. As we approach the time of 1984, the very word itself conjuring up factors of control of the human race. We also understand that configurations of astrology and cycles of war, centuries of cycles of human behavior converge along with the returning dark cycle and the end of the age Jesus prophesied in Matthew 24, all coming to that focalization of limits to freedom through factors of control. If we can define these factors of control and work on them diligently, I am certain that we will one by one tear down the bricks in the tomb that is built around the living embryo, the embryonic Christ that each one is. 200 years ago, there was a unique event in history. Enter Saint Germain. Enter the beloved. And the United States of America was conceived and born out of the very heart of Mother Liberty. A small, determined group of Americans decided it was better to die fighting for freedom than to live in bondage. They saw the consequences. They knew that to live, by definition, was to breathe free. They were tired of being controlled economically, politically, and religiously. They declared their independence from King George, and although the odds seemed very much against them, defeated the preeminent military power of their day. As a result, they earned the opportunity to secure for themselves and their posterity certain inalienable rights, which included life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The light of the threefold flame is upon these words, the light of freedom. Life itself as the very power to exist in the fullest sense of the word. Life that contains the will to be without the compromise, again, of those controls that result in the subconscious will not to be. The flame of freedom and liberty, the intelligence and the illumination to understand what happiness is and to pursue that happiness that has to do with the soul's reunion with the Almighty, which is the greatest bliss of the universe. These inalienable rights were secured, yet they are being taken from us today. And what's worse about the whole affair of control, it is being done without the people realizing just how much they have lost of their own God control under the sun and the stars, and at home on the range that is their force field in matter. The revolution, which gained concrete political expression in the Constitution of the United States, protected individual liberties. This means the individualization of the liberty flame, and that means the exercise of liberty. Let us make a list in our notebooks of liberties which we have never exercised in this life, and let us go out this year in defiance of 1984 and let us exercise those liberties. The protection of these liberties was accomplished by dividing formal governmental authority in order to limit abuses of power. Our forefathers were not writing on a clean white page of history. They came out of adversity, out of bondage, out of abuse. They had studied the Nephilim superpowers of Europe, the old world with all of its contrivances. They knew how the human spirit could be oppressed and put down. They had a long history of the Judeo-Christian tradition. They knew what they were looking for. They were receptive vessels as messengers of Saint Germain. He had something to work with. They were smart men and women. Limits to abuses of power enumeration of specific rights, basically speech, religion, press, and assembly. Why should they enumerate these except that they had been taken from them in one form or another? Today, most of us take these freedoms for granted, or we do not exercise them at all. When was the last time you made a speech in exercise of that freedom? Get to Poland, get to the USSR, and then you value the freedom of speech, and then you are willing to die for it, to stand up for what you believe, and to tell the people of the abuses of power. Free speech demands that we learn how to speak, how to organize the logic of the word, how to make an impact to arouse our fellow citizens to some injustice. It requires the tutoring of the mind and heart. Let's get with it. Let's all be speech makers, writers, and deliverers. I'm a bit weary of hearing myself. Freedom of religion. This we exercise, perhaps more than all the rest, because we are strong and stalwart believers in a unique philosophy that goes straight as an arrow from point A to point B, that is, from the soul to the mighty I Am Presence. And we are determined to find the most direct route. We are determined to calculate the mileage, how far we can go in 70, and to be sure that we go on that road, go the correct speed, and do not miscalculate. Yes, we are forerunners of the Aquarian age, and we are God determined that our religion will do what religion is supposed to do: bind the soul to Almighty God, not to the power elite. Freedom of the press is a power we have exercised for at least 23 years in this organization. We've become more and more professional at it, but we think we have only just begun to exercise that which is a right and not a privilege for the few. Our assembly here in this state of Montana, anywhere we wish, under our own tent and on our own land, is almost a miracle in itself. As you well know, by zoning laws, the power elite have found ways to restrict the assembly of the people. When we first bought God's 220 green acres at Camelot, and we erected our tent for a conference, we were promptly told to take it down. The zoning laws did not permit us to raise a tent at Camelot. Our attorney was outraged. We challenged the system. We said it is our right, and we heard no more. Here there are no such laws, and by the grace of God, we mean to keep it that way. Many Americans take these freedoms for granted. I trust we do not. The framers were aware that the Constitution would not automatically guarantee freedom, no matter how brilliantly it was conceived. They were prophets. They knew the end from the beginning. What a short period is 200 years to come to that moment where we can truly say that a large percentage of our people do not understand the freedoms, do not exercise them, and for all intents and purposes do not desire to do so. Thus you can see how and why the flickering of the threefold flame occurred, how it became shorter and shorter by want of exercise of true liberty. The framers realized that it created a political context in which people could exercise their freedoms if they chose to, but recognized it was not an automatic process. Freedom had to be understood, cherished, and defended by each new generation. It seems that in every age and in every decade, in every generation, the most striking way that we learn about power and its abuses is in personal contact in our own lives, or by contact with various parts of the world where freedoms are being violated. However much we know about Cambodia today, or Afghanistan, or Poland, or inside the Soviet Union, or the plight of the Jews there, it is one step removed from our home and our heart. And not until we are personally challenged do we begin to feel the burning of the heart, the need to exercise the threefold flame, the need for a flame of liberty, because nothing else but the flame of liberty will quench world tyranny. And so only when the sons of liberty are driven to the very wall do they begin to exercise that determination, that strength, that will to go to the very heart of the great central sun and find that light and that power, that wisdom, that means, that love to destroy this planetary and interplanetary cancer of the Nephilim gods, moving to control and therefore to destroy the human race. Perhaps you remember the first moment when you experienced injustice or the unjust control of some aspect of your life or your family. It is important to remember those experiences before we become hardened to them and accept them as a way of life. Because the first impact, the first sudden clash of something limiting against the pure spirit that breathes free, that is the moment when we begin to adjust and cynicism replaces that sense of freedom where the whole universe is our rightful home. Following the American example, many nations guaranteed their citizens greater personal liberty and democratic representation. America was the example nation from the very beginning, the shepherd nation of how to conquer world tyranny. As you well know, throughout the course of history, freedom has been the exception on planet Earth, not the rule. The whole evolution of the human race in the understanding of monotheism, one God, and man answerable to his God and none other, has been going on for thousands of years. Its purpose has been to make man a co-creator with God, and therefore never, never, never to submit to any other. The temptations have been great. They have been overwhelming to follow the Canaanite gods, materialism, and all of the idolaters that parade before us daily. Because we must confess there is a part of ourselves, the unconscious self, the unreal self, that would rather be slave than free, would rather submit and cease thinking, feeling, creating. There are moments of weariness when we would all rather be told what to do than to think for ourselves. Creative living takes constant vigilance because every act of creation affects one's entire planetary evolution. Everything I do, I know, has consequences for the entire evolution. I have always believed that, and I have found that ratified in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant and his categorical imperative. Act as though everyone in the human race would do exactly as you are doing, and thereby test the strategy of your own morality. Thus freedom is on the move in planet Earth because Saint Germain is the great example of freedom in our midst, and nowhere has he made his statement more plain than in the Constitution of the United States of America. Today, only 37 of the 168 nations in the world, only 22%, can be called free nations. The other 78% are roughly evenly divided between those that are partly free and those which have no freedom at all. And this did not happen by accident. There are no accidents. There is only the law of karma and the individual exercise of free will to enter the heart of the living Savior Jesus Christ, and by His grace to overcome the irrevocable law of karma. The loss of freedom is a karmic problem. Anyone who is enslaved upon planet Earth is enslaved by choice. No matter what the appearance, this is the word of Saint Germain. By choice in this life or a previous life. If Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death," then you can understand that those who are enslaved have said, "Give me life and give me slavery." They have preferred living as slaves than dying as heroes. And therefore, generation by generation, there has been an erosion of liberty. And every single individual who has failed as the watchman of the Lord, the watchman of the night, everyone who has lost an increment of freedom for his village, his family, or his own soul, has re-embodied at that point of the loss of freedom to regain it. This is the challenge which the God of freedom flings in the very teeth of His sons and daughters. Because even spiritual evolution is the survival of the fittest. God wants the survival of career sons and daughters of God. Understand, therefore, the call of hierarchy and the absolute mandate of your discipleship under Jesus Christ. And never, never, never submit to being a robot or a mechanization man ever, ever again. Even when you follow obediently the orders of a superior, do so creatively in your own heart. Exercise your heart. Give your love to the task. And by your love and ingenuity and illumination, increase the blessing. Increase the blessing, and you will rise on the ladder of life. We will never submit to automation, and this is what the fallen ones want, and this is the meaning of 1984. In countries such as the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, the rulers have an absolute monopoly of political power by design. Who is at fault? Those who could have and did not stop them. Those who aided and abetted them. Let their judgment be upon them, upon their own heads, and let the blood of the prophets be required of them. We have grown up in a world where there have been immense losses of freedom by betrayal. Betrayal of leaders in our own United States of America who are not worthy to be called leaders. We do not fear the accountability or the responsibility to reverse the course of Mao in China or Lenin in the Soviet Union. We do not fear the task, nor are we daunted. We do not consider the task greater than ourselves because we know who we are in God. We are part of the immensity of God, Elohim, the great white brotherhood. And all of their gains are come to naught because they are not real. They have no power. And we will stand upon that truth until the last rat of world totalitarianism is driven back into the very nadir of its origin. We know We know that one word spoken as the word, one word that is part of Maitreya Buddha, Jesus Christ, Gautama, one word spoken by the fervent heart can cause the fallen ones to tremble and their entire Assyrian Babylonian empires to come tumbling down. This is the power resident in the threefold flame within you. This is the meaning of a seminar on freedom, that you understand your alignment with the inner God and never, never accept the hypnotic spell, the discouragement, the temptation to not give the word, to not challenge the infamous when you are prompted by Christ to do so. When you contact injustice through the daily newspaper and through the evening news, be alert and challenge it. One word from God within you, and they come tumbling down. This earth is about to be saved in the arms of Saint Germain. Will you help him? Controlled by design, by the scheming of the underworld. Lenin didn't want there to be any question about it, no questioning of the control of the power elite. He wrote in 1920, "Dictatorship means neither more nor less than unlimited power resting directly on force, not limited by anything, not restrained by any laws or any absolute rule." It's a most amazing thing, but even God is not a dictator. God does not run his universe as a dictatorship. Therefore, no dictatorship can stand, because it does not rest on any principle, on any etheric matrix, on any divine law. It is absolutely contrary to immortal freedom. Therefore, it cannot stand. Its day is done. Now we have to look at who is inserting the toothpicks to hold up world dictatorship. And that is all that it hangs by, toothpicks. Soviet leadership has never deviated from that principle, and the communists in China have made every effort to follow suit. In the United States, there has been a drift towards centralization of authority in the federal government, one of the important signs of the loss of liberty. Centralization means that the people would rather have the federal government decide everything for them so they can live happily ever after. A life of pleasure, superficiality, and making money and more money, etc., with very little thinking about economics, the equation of life, or the preparation for the hereafter. This allowing of the federal government, of the federal courts, of the Supreme Court to decide social issues is the death of the greatest civilization that has ever been known since the sinking of Lemuria. And this is what we must realize. Centralization takes away from the individual the exercise of his heart flame and his creativity. Many preconditions to totalitarianism exist in the United States. Progressive income tax, decline of the power of the individual states, and the rise of a bloated bureaucracy. But because of our political culture, those who would like to replace the Constitution and alter the structure of our republic are approaching their object in a circuitous fashion, otherwise known as serpentine. Zbigniew Brzezinski, one and the same, circuitous serpentine. Former National Security Advisor and one of the architects of the Trilateral Commission, an international power elite policy-making group, addressed this prospect in his book, Between Two Ages. He said the approaching 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence could justify a call for a national constitutional convention to re-examine the nation's formal institutional framework. Either 76 or 89, the 200th anniversary of the Constitution could serve as a suitable target date for culminating a national dialogue on the relevance of existing arrangements. He personally does not believe the Constitution relevant to his designs for the course of American history. So he wants a dialogue. As the serpents say, let's talk. They always want to discuss so that point by point, finally through their dialectical materialism, they can arrive at the premise and the conclusion of their design. A dialogue on the relevance of existing arrangements, the workings of the representative process, and the desirability of imitating the various European regionalization reforms and of streamlining the administrative structure. So many words to say, let's throw out the Constitution and remake the American government so that the power elite can rule the world. He goes on with more words saying, realism, however, forces us to recognize that the necessary political innovation will not come from direct constitutional reform, desirable as that would be. The needed change is more likely to develop incrementally and less overtly. He is saying we won't get away with it obviously and directly, so we'll do it little by little, in hidden ways and underneath, until one fine day the people wake up and it is a fait accompli. World regionalism, a one world government, not of and by and for the people, not to guarantee the individual access to Almighty God, but to guarantee the government of, by, and for the power elite, who we have unmasked and exposed as the godless Nephilim, Watcher, fallen angels, who have sought to take over the earth, but will not take over the earth because the legions of freedom are on the march. Incremental change, such as big envisions, is already taking place in many ways. This is the wearing away of resistance. Psychologists understand this, the shock factor. First, we are shocked at the loss of a liberty, and then it becomes commonplace, and then we no longer care because it is very difficult to sustain a fighting momentum, a soldier's pace, a watchman's vigil, all the time, year in, year out, all of one's life. But that is the meaning of being a creative, career son of God. Your vigil is never, never abandoned. Your guard is not let down because your ascension is at stake. And with your ascension, the rise of all who follow you on the path of your own soul freedom. Incremental change. Watch. Watch the change and put your foot down and do not allow it to pass in your community. During the Carter administration, virtually every important cabinet post was filled by members of the Trilateral Commission, a body of individuals dedicated to international world government at the expense of the individual. The individual must be expendable on planet Earth if the power elite are to have an unlimited dictatorship. The Commission is like a political action committee for international bankers, such as David Rockefeller and big businessmen from the US, Western Europe, and Japan. So well was the Trilateral Commission represented in the Carter administration. The President, Vice President, Secretaries of State and Defense, National Security Advisor among them. It was viewed by some as a coup, Others were indifferent to such a turn of events. There is no indifference on the part of Gautama Buddha to this very plot against humanity. There can be no ignorance of absolute evil by those who have espoused the cause of absolute good. We cannot be indifferent to incremental change. While there are some trilateral commissioners, such as Caspar Weinberger, Secretary of Defense, serving in the Reagan administration, they are not as numerous as they were in the Carter administration. But they serve alongside members of its sister organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Secretary of State George Shultz, for example, is the director of the CFR, as the Council is known. Brzezinski sees the shift of power away from the people to policy planning groups. In other words, the experts should rule society. And we will see that the little people do not become the experts by limiting their education and making it so poor that they cannot lift their heads. They cannot read or write or spell or communicate or even speak or formulate logical ideas and conclusions for the practical self-government which they have inherited. This is the control behind the decay in education in America today. It is not something that just happened. It was plotted in hell against the people of this land. And the true education must be and ought to be and is the education of the heart, the education of the threefold flame, the drawing down of that Christ potential. I can tell you something about 5-year-olds at Montessori International. They know the power of the spoken word, and they know God answers their calls. They know what it means to work with angels to solve problems. They know what it means to feel the fire and fervor of freedom in their hearts. They know who is the I am that I am. And this will stay with them as long as they live, wherever they go, because these are their childhood prayers, their childhood contact with the living word. And Maria Montessori told us how devotional is the nature of the little child. And Lenin knew it also. Thus we realize that there can be the training of the Christ consciousness, and we must do more towards it. We can give our children more than we are giving them in independent exercises in leadership, more in their understanding of the age of technology and their place in the world. And we will keep on probing and receiving the light of revolution in education. We will not let our people be uninformed and uneducated so that they are intimidated by the fallen ones who are educated academically and intellectually but have no heart and therefore cannot make a heart decision for America, the heart nation of the world. Brzezinski says, technological developments make it certain that modern society will require more and more planning. Deliberate management of the American future will become widespread. He is very open about saying, we, the power elite, are determined to manage the people, to plan the future, with the planner eventually displacing the lawyer as the key social legislator and manipulator. End of quote. Sons and daughters of God are the most likely individuals to be the planners for their families, for their communities, for their businesses, for their nations. Sons and daughters of God being able to access the cosmic computer of the cosmic Christ can draw forth a creative and innovative way of life. And they do not need the power elite to plan their present, their future, and beyond the grave into the next world. For this is their goal, absolute total control, inner space, outer space, and beyond all technological revolution. They want to control the soul of the people for eternity. And because we take our stand physically in this hour of our final incarnation, we will see to it that we raise our hand with the Buddha and say, thus far and no farther. Planet Earth will be the nemesis of the fallen angels. They will be sorry they ever took it on. If we are to reverse the pattern of the erosion of our freedoms, we must now assess the will to dominate on the part of the power elite in light of the will to freedom and individuality on the part of the American people. We must also examine the methods of tyranny. How much do the people want freedom? How much does the power elite want to control? And who has the greater will? Who has the greater determination? The people have a will to be free, but it is not focused by Christ's illumination. They do not understand freedom, what it means to be free, or how to defend their freedom. They do not understand that the gas wars or the manipulation of prices are equal to the erosion of spiritual and soul freedom within. They do not understand the as above, so below, the inner-outer action, that every freedom lost in the physical is a loss of freedom on the inner. It's a loss of integrity. It's a loss of the exercise of God consciousness. The people have the will, but the power elite have the expertise, and therefore their will is more focused. They know the vulnerability of people, and they know what that vulnerability can be, and therefore they program the people psychologically to their own weaknesses, and they trip them up every time. Thus far and no farther. For the sons of freedom are on the march, the daughters of freedom are ready, and we are determined now to give the education of the heart to all people of our society and to challenge this base injustice of the taking from the people the illumination of their own hearts, putting a shroud over their own heart flame so that they cannot see even the light of their own faces shining and reflecting the light of their own Christ self. The separation of the people from reality is the modus operandi of the fallen ones, and they have created a mass unreality and subjected the people to it. Throughout all history, despotic rulers have employed various means to keep civilian populations under control. The use of secret police, the relocation of captured populations, perpetual war, the control of foodstuffs, limitations on travel, and the manipulation of the economy were among the ways that rulers maintain power. Sometimes their methods are overt, sometimes they are subtle, but the bottom line of tyranny is the suppression and finally the destruction of the individual soul, the individual mind and heart. We have an effective means to limit the power of the state and the power elite. Our Constitution, we still have it. They have not taken it from us. But there is a general lack of understanding of our own system. When accompanied by a decline in the will to maintain our liberties, it is only a matter of time before our freedoms dissipate. They evaporate. They go back to the source whence they came, which is heaven. Freedom is a gift of heaven. Its home is heaven. And in the presence of tyranny, it flies away like a bird of paradise and a bird that's free. We need to realize that to anchor freedom, we must anchor God consciousness. And we know the law of the science of the spoken word. Every single day, we repeat our prayers, because each 24-hour cycle, we must renew that flame. So it is with freedom. It goes back to its natural octave. While some people have a strong drive to attain freedom, psychologist Erich Fromm has observed a widespread tendency for people to flee from freedom. People are afraid of freedom, afraid of what they might do, afraid of what they might not do, afraid to take care of themselves, afraid to be alone in a universe. Have you ever been absolutely alone in a territory wide and vast? where you could hear or see no other soul, no other physical person? How long could you maintain individuality in absolute aloneness? Thus there is a fleeing from freedom for many reasons, and sometimes especially when people have freedom. Fromm, historian Arnold Toynbee, and others have noticed the tendency for entire populations, when faced by difficult circumstances, to capitulate and hence turn their back on the responsibility of freedom. The rise of an authoritarian or even a totalitarian figure can be a great relief to a populace willing to relinquish their freedoms to someone who will assume the responsibilities for life. Fromm likened this to the drive to get rid of the individual self, to lose oneself, in other words, to get rid of the burden of freedom. The responsibility for freedom is immense. The responsibility for decision-making. Each and every one of us knows what it is like to be a child. Take the hand of a parent, be carefree, and trust that we will be led and guided, taken care of, kept warm and fed, and tucked in at night. Wise is the parent who leaves off continuous holding the hand, caring for and protecting the child. Children must come to abrupt realizations that if they do not exercise their limbs, their mind, their heart, they may not eat, they may not have a sweater or a coat, or they may not take the right path to the house of grandmother. Children who are brought up overly protected or by powerful parents who make all decisions want to find the same in a spouse, in a government, in society. Therefore, let us understand the role of parent to actually give to the child a certain conditioning to the world as it is and not in the ideal state. Teaching children to fend for themselves is extremely important at an early age. God wants you to learn how to figure out your place in the sun, to make reasonable, right, and lawful conclusions given the perplexities and circumstances of a tired planet, a weary world filled with cross currents of karma, decisions that at best must sometimes be a compromise. But we take the compromise. It's the nearest right. It's the highest we can do. It's the best. And if we do it, we put our stake on higher ground. And then when we come up to that ground by our conclusion, we can find a better world and make newer and better decisions that are closer and closer and closer to divine reality. We don't gain the infinite freedom all at once. But if we deny so much as a matchstick of freedom in our life or in our neighbor's life, we are putting out a candle of freedom that could light a world. And therefore, every freedom that you fail to exercise creatively becomes a shackle and a bondage. This is why your thoughts, your cogitation, your creativity, what you do with your energy for God every day so counts. It counts, and you must not loll along unthinkingly. You must be thinking all the time. Waking and sleeping, the cosmic Christ has that motion of the universe, of the cosmic creation within you, and a part of it applies to your very specific project. However small it may be, the mind of Christ is there to engender excellence so that you can learn through every act how to contact infinity.
Plant the seed in our home, and boys, let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys, call it the Liberty Tree. It's the tall old tree and the strong old tree, and we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.
The preceding public access program has been presented through the assistance of Church Universal and Triumphant, Box A, Malibu, California, 90265. If you would like to know more, call this number or write this address.